Hey, everybody, and welcome. When we think about the holidays, certain things just kind of come to mind, right?
Hmm.
Like presents and decorations and family gatherings. But what if I told you that some Christian congregations actually choose not to celebrate Christmas?
It is a decision that definitely makes you stop and think.
Yeah, it's a topic that kind of challenges our assumptions, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Sounds intriguing.
We're going to be looking at a sermon by Pastor Shane Vaughn. Now, his perspective is really interesting because it's not just like a surface level thing.
Right.
He really goes deep into the history and theology behind it, and you can seriously feel his personal conviction, like in every word.
You hit the nail on the head. It's not about, disliking the holiday or being a Grinch or anything.
Yeah.
Pastor Vaughn's coming from this place of really wanting to be faithful to what he sees as the biblical commandments and God's traditions.
Oh, okay.
It's more about seeking, I guess you could say, a different path.
A different path, yeah. And one of the first things he brings up is this idea from the Old Testament about the Israelites being called to be set apart, distinct.
Mm-hmm.
He even quotes the part that says, don't learn their customs, their traditions, their celebrations. Like, whoa.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement.
It's a powerful statement for sure.
And I think it speaks to this idea of, preserving a unique identity, even when you're surrounded by, all these different cultures, like holding on to those practices that make your faith distinct.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so then he brings up the term pagan, which can be kind of loaded.
Yeah,
But it seems like he's trying to define it very specifically.
definitely. He's not using it in like a negative way.
Okay.
He's talking
Yeah.
about those belief systems that were common in Europe before Christianity really spread,
Okay.
which often involved like a deep connection to nature and a different way of understanding the divine.
I see. So it's more about acknowledging a different worldview? Okay. Which leads us to the early church and the challenges they faced trying to spread Christianity, especially to people in, like, the Celtic regions.
It's fascinating to think about, you have the Roman Catholic Church trying to introduce this new faith.
Right.
But the Celtic people are already so deeply rooted in their own traditions, especially around the winter solstice,
Yeah.
which was this time packed with, symbolism and rituals and everything.
And as Pastor Vaughn points out, these Celtic people, while they were open to Christ, they weren't too keen on giving up those, like, super ingrained customs they had.
Right. It creates this really interesting dilemma for the early church, doesn't it? Like, how do you bridge these two seemingly very different belief systems?
Right.
Do you just say, nope, you got to completely abandon everything you've known?
Yeah.
Or do you try to find some common ground?
And that's where December 25th itself becomes a huge focal point.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a Christian holiday. It's got all this baggage, right?
Mhm.
It also has meaning in those older pagan traditions.
You can almost picture it like a historical crossroads,
Okay.
The winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, fell on December 25th on the Julian calendar.
Yeah.
And for pagans, this was a scary time.
Really?
Yeah, because the sun seemed to be, like, dying.
Oh, wow.
So they would honor Sol Invictus, the sun god, hoping it would come back.
Wow. And then on top of that, they also celebrated the birth of the god Tammuz on that same date.
It's crazy.
So you
Jeff.
got this, like, multi-layered, like a parfait, but with beliefs and practices all in this one day.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot to unpack. And it's interesting because it's not so different from how cultures, like, blend today. I mean, think about Cinco de Mayo. It's a fun celebration for a lot of folks, but it comes from a very specific place in Mexican history and identity.
Exactly. And I think this is where we start to see the real heart of Pastor Vaughn's argument.
Yeah.
This merging of, like, pagan practices into what we now know as Christmas. It's really what troubles him.
I see.
He even uses the example of the Christmas tree, which initially was decorated with candles to honor Sol Invictus. Like, that's a pretty it's a pretty stark image, right?
Yeah.
That kind of discovery can really shake things up for some people.
I could see that.
Something you've always connected with one meaning suddenly has this whole other backstory.
Like, it makes you re-examine things.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And for Pastor Vaughn, it leads him on this search for a way to celebrate Christ's birth without those influences.
And he thinks he's found it in Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles.
Okay, so why Sukkot? What makes it a more, like, authentic, I guess, celebration of Christ's birth?
Well, you see, Sukkot is a week-long festival commemorating the Israelites' journey through the wilderness after escaping Egypt.
Okay,
It's all about rejoicing and thanking God for protection and provision.
I see.
And Pastor Vaughn believes it aligns more closely with the actual time of Christ's birth.
Oh.
Plus, it's a commanded holy day, unlike December 25th, which was kind of like adopted of...
So he's connecting it back to the actual biblical narrative then.
Exactly. He's digging for that deeper meaning and those connections that resonate with how he understands Scripture.
I see. And this is what feels like a more genuine way for him to honor Christ's birth.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting because even though he's taking this stance, he's very clear that it's a personal conviction.
Absolutely.
It's not about, like, judging people who do celebrate Christmas.
Right. He even says, we have no problem with you at all. We just wish that you didn't have a problem with us. It's about, understanding each other and accepting different perspectives within Christianity.
Man, this is already so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
I'm really starting to see all the different layers of history and theology.
And this is just the beginning. There's so much more to uncover about what this decision actually means on a personal and a social level.
Right.
So stick around, because we're going to dig into that next.
It's really amazing how this one sermon has, blown open a whole new way of thinking about Christmas for me.
Yeah. It does make you wonder how much we just take for granted, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, we grow up with these traditions, but do we ever really stop to think about where they came from?
Yeah.
Or what they really mean?
This whole idea of separating yourself from, the dominant culture to keep a unique identity is so interesting.
Yeah.
We see it in other groups, too, like the Amish.
Oh, yeah.
They've made this conscious decision to live separately, limiting their exposure to, modern technology conveniences.
Right. It's about holding on to a certain way of life and a set of values, even if it means standing apart from everyone else.
Well, it really begs the question, then, what does it truly mean to belong?
That's a good question.
Is it about, adopting every single practice, or is there room for, individual choices?
Right.
Interpretation?
Especially in a world that's so interconnected now.
Yeah.
With all these different beliefs and traditions constantly mixing and bumping into each other. It's a tough balancing act.
It really is.
Yeah.
How do you hold on to what's sacred to you when the world around you might not understand or share those same values?
Yeah.
And how do you do that without judging or condemning others who choose differently?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance between your own convictions and, compassion for others.
Yeah.
Well, Pastor Vaughn seems to be trying to do just that, He's passionate about his beliefs, but he's not out there trying to force his views on everyone else.
I was really struck by that, how much he emphasized personal conviction.
Right.
And how his choice isn't about judging those who celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, he's simply sharing his understanding of the Bible and explaining why he's made this choice for himself.
It got me thinking about all the different ways people live out their faith.
Yeah.
Even within the same religion, there's so much diversity, right?
That's
So much
so
nuance. It's like a tapestry with all these different threads coming together to make a beautiful picture.
That's a great analogy. Each thread is important.
And they all kind of add to the richness of that overall picture.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
It reminds us that there's always more to learn and different angles to look at things from.
And it challenges us to step outside our own little bubbles
Yeah.
and really listen to people who see things differently.
Yeah.
To appreciate that, their beliefs are just as sincere as ours, even if we don't agree with every detail.
That's a really good point.
So what's been standing out to you so far?
Oh, let me think.
What thoughts or questions has this discussion brought up for you?
Well, for me, I think the most eye-opening thing has been seeing how deeply our traditions are woven into history,
Yeah.
We often just accept things as they are without really digging into their origins or how their meaning has changed over time.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Each layer reveals something new.
That's a great way to put it.
And now I'm wondering what other traditions might have these, surprising backstories that we're totally clueless about.
That's a fantastic question. That it speaks to how important it is to be curious,
Yeah.
To always be open to learning and discovering new things.
That's why I love these deep dives so much. They're like a mental adventure,
I agree.
expanding our horizons and taking us to places we never expected to go.
Yeah, and in this case, it's making us really think critically about traditions, right?
Mhm.
Our own and those of other people, to understand them better, question where they came from, and then ultimately make conscious choices about what we want to embrace and why.
It's not about just blindly following tradition then, but about understanding it and making it our own.
Exactly. And in a world that's constantly pushing us to conform, I think that kind of independent thought is so important.
You're so right. It's about being brave enough to stand out,
Yeah.
to embrace what makes us unique,
Yeah.
even if it goes against what everyone else is doing. We need more of that in the world.
Absolutely. And when we come across people who choose a different path, let's try to approach them with kindness and understanding.
That's a great point. Recognizing that their journey is just as valid as ours.
Hmm.
Man, this deep dive's given me so much to think about.
Me too.
I bet our listeners are feeling it too.
Yeah, I hope it sparks some curiosity in them.
Yeah.
Maybe they have new questions they want to explore, or they're even thinking about having some of these open and honest conversations with their friends and family who see things a little differently.
That would be amazing. Those are the kinds of conversations that help us bridge divides, build empathy, and ultimately create a world that's a little more tolerant and compassionate.
I couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been so insightful.
It really has. So let's take a minute to gather our thoughts.
Yeah, good idea.
Before we head into the final part of this exploration,
Okay.
we still have so much to uncover. It's really something else how Pastor Vaughn can be so strong in his beliefs, but still be so, respectful
Mm-hmm.
of people who see things differently.
Yeah.
It's a tough thing to do, you know?
It really does say a lot about him. He obviously cares deeply about following what he sees as the truth of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not trying to, put anyone down for making a different choice.
It's a pretty powerful message, especially these days when, it feels like people can't disagree without getting all
Yeah.
angry and divisive.
It's like he's saying, look, we can disagree,
Yeah.
but we don't have to be, nasty about it.
Yeah.
We can respect each other even if we don't totally get where the other person's coming from.
That's a lesson that goes way beyond just Christmas, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure.
It applies to, anything where people have different viewpoints,
Right.
Like politics, religion, even just personal preferences.
It all comes back to finding that common ground, right?
Yeah.
Trying to understand each other instead of focusing on what sets us apart.
Absolutely. And remembering that everyone's coming at things from their own unique experiences and values and all that.
Yeah.
Instead of judging right away, maybe we should try to get why someone believes what they do.
That's such a good point. What led them to their conclusions? What are they trying to uphold?
It's like almost trying to see the world through their eyes, cultivating empathy and realizing that our own view is just one tiny piece of this giant puzzle.
That's what's so cool about these kinds of conversations,
Yeah.
It's not about being right or wrong.
Right. It's about expanding our own understanding of the world and ourselves.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has definitely done that for me.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I've got a whole new perspective on Christmas and faith and how important it is to have these open-minded conversations with people.
Mm.
Hopefully our listeners are feeling that way too.
Yeah. I hope they've got some new questions rattling around in their heads, or maybe even, they're inspired to have those heart-to-heart talks with friends and family who see things a little differently.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
Because it's those kinds of conversations that help us connect with each other. Build understanding and create a world where everyone feels a little more accepted and cared for.
You said it. Differences can actually make our lives richer as long as we're willing to approach them with curiosity and respect.
So well said.
Yeah.
As we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you with one last thought.
Okay.
How has all this changed the way you think about traditions? What does it really mean to live out your beliefs? And how can we do that while still respecting those who choose a different path?
Those are some really big questions.
They are big questions.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that traditions aren't set in stone.
Yeah.
They change over time with history, culture, and how people interpret them.
That's a good thing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the important thing is to be mindful of them. Try to understand what they mean and how they fit into our own lives.
Yeah.
And if we come across viewpoints that challenge our own, let's see that as a chance to learn and grow, to connect with others on a deeper level and learn from each other.
That's beautiful. It seems like the real heart of the holidays, however we choose to celebrate them, is about being open-minded, understanding, and having those thoughtful conversations.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
It's been great having you all along.
And to our listeners, until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep the conversation going.
We'll see you soon.